Namaskar to all of you, and thank you, Aditya and Arunima, for such soulful songs, and a heartfelt gratitude to all of you for being here. This is a series on Sri Aurobindo's book, Synthesis of Yoga, and in the past few chapters, Sri Aurobindo has shared about the meaning of Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is a very popular term. We all like to talk about it, reflect upon it, and we all have our own version of what really is the meaning of Karma Yoga. There are interpretations and misinterpretations. And Karma Yoga has a very broad meaning and various aspects to it, which Sri Aurobindo describes through a whole set of chapters, starting from self-consecration, self-surrender, equality, equanimity, the three modes of nature, the master of works, the supreme will. And he explains different facets of what truly Karma Yoga means. And this chapter, which is called The Divine Works, is another aspect of Karma Yoga, where Sri Aurobindo answers the question that what happens and what does an individual choose when a certain level of self-mastery has arrived in an individual. There is a certain level of self-consecration to the divine. The person has learned and has developed the capacity to de-identify oneself from the three modes of nature. There is a certain level of surrender, peace and silence in the being. The soul has learned to develop a conscious communion with the transcendent divine. And with all this, there is a certain level of self-mastery and peace within the being. What is left thereafter is the question Sri Aurobindo helps us explore through this chapter. One of the common answers that we get from the common thought especially in our country, India, is what is left is the ultimate nirvana or moksha, or a freedom from the cycle of birth and death. And that is because this world is an illusion and this world is a drama. And so even works here are an illusion. So eventually the soul seeks to be in communion with the divine and waits for that moment when there is entire liberation from this world of illusion. And this is more so because works in our ordinary life are tied to three main motives which Sri Aurobindo describes. The first being desires, and second, a basic necessity to meet one's survival, and third, a kind of a restless instinct within us. If we reflect upon it with an example of eating food, one can be driven by a basic motive of meeting one's hunger needs through food, which is the motive of meeting one's necessities. or the individual can be driven by desire or craving for that special food which they like, whether it is that special ice cream or a special sweet, and then one is driven to go out and buy those things. Or in today's world, one can order in whatever they like. So that is being driven by the desire. And then the third possibility is, if one is in a movie hall watching a thriller movie and there are these restlessness or a sense of thrill that the person is experiencing, and in that you have a bag of popcorn and you're eating incessantly. So it can be a necessity driven or a desire driven or a restless instinct which takes over us in certain moments. To look at it with another example of our professional life, one may choose to work for meeting the basic needs or survival of the family, or by greater ambitions of a big house, a big car, or fame and name, or by intellectual ambitions or ambitions of power. Or there are always some people who find it difficult to just rest and do nothing, and they want to do something all the time, and that is what drives them to pick up one project after the another. So these three motives are constantly driving our ordinary life. And coming back to the question, a sadhak which has developed a certain self-mastery over these three instincts and has learned and honed that skill to silence all three, the question is, what then remains for that sadhak? But the fact is that even if these are silenced, the truth is that until a soul is in this human frame, it is always subject to the law of cause and effect. Whether there is action or inaction, one is always subject to the law of cause and effect. It is easier for us to understand that every action has its reaction, but it is also true that every inaction also has a reaction. And Sri Aurobindo describes this through the words, all existence in the world is work, force, potency, and has a dynamic effect in the whole by its mere presence. So he's using the words all existence, mere presence. Just by existing in this world, even in a state of inaction, it is still a work, it is still a force, it is still a potency, and it does have a dynamic effect on the whole. Whether it is the inertia of the clod, so whether it is the tamas of a person who is lost in inaction, even the silence of the immobile Buddha on the verge of nirvana. So it is not just the inaction of tamas, but the inaction of great souls like Buddha on the verge of nirvana, sitting in this delightful, lightful, sattvic silence. It still is subject to the law of cause and effect. And if the cause of tamas or inertia of the clod has an effect of attracting more inertia, there is also some effect of that sattvic silence. As Sri Aurobindo describes in one of the previous chapters, that tamas or inaction contradicts rajas and sattva in different ways. It contradicts rajas by inertia or stopping action, and it contradicts sattva by creating a certain degree of narrowness in the being. Sattva is about expansion, and tamas creates narrowness of the vision and a certain level of rigidity of rights and wrongs in sattva. So whether it is a sattvic silence or a tamasic silence, it is still subject to the law of cause and effect. So then what is it that will bring a true liberative action for the individual seeking to go beyond the self-mastery of silence is the question here. And the truth that Sri Aurobindo reveals is that one needs to understand and acknowledge that it is not the I which is working or I which is not working. It is actually the three modes of nature, the Prakriti, which is working through the individual. That awareness needs to emerge, because that Prakriti itself is the creator of the physical, the vital, the mind, the intellect, and also this thought centralization which we refer to as I. So it is this Prakriti which is working through the physicality and the whole of the individual. And what it is doing is, with what purpose it is doing is to express that deeper self or that deeper power which is in an intimate connection with the Supreme. And a true liberation is to live close to that deeper self or that deeper power and uphold the action of the divine. To look at it with an example, one can see oneself in our ordinary life being lost in the jungle or forest of life, where there are lures, their desires, their insecurities of animals all around us. And one choice, being lost in this jungle, is to rise up to a rock which is far above any animal can reach, any animal of desire or animal of insecurity can reach, and sit there and feel that now I'm safe and secure and I have moved above the forest of life. But the fact is that eventually we will have to come down, the individual will have to come down in order to meet his basic needs and necessities and to fulfill the purpose of his life. And then again the person finds himself immersed in the same jungle. Or the other possibility is to figure out the way out of that jungle into that deeper space which is inclusive of all the forests of life. And from that liberated space, close to the creator of all the forests, fulfill the purpose of the whole. And here, rising up to the rock is not to be idealized nor to be rejected, because that also serves a purpose. It serves the purpose because the moment we are trying to figure out the way out of the jungle, we do get overwhelmed from time to time, and we do need a place to withdraw up onto a rock and look around. Sometimes it's easier to detach and de-identify for a while and rise above and look around in the jungle. What may be the way for me to move out of it? But that's not the ultimate solution. So that meditative silence that meditative withdrawal from life has its own purpose and is a part of the process, but not the ultimate goal. And through this work and moving out of the jungle, or this process of finding one's way out of the jungle, one is constantly working in life. And each of our action generally is driven towards either of the three motives. And here it's a different kind of motive. The first motive, when we are trying to find our way out of the jungle, is self-development. One wants to develop the capacities to be able to look at these animals, look at these challenges on the path, and be able to deal with them. So developing that capacity one may call as self-development. And then at the same time, the next motive is self-fulfillment. It is to be able, every individual who is born here is born with certain gifts and strengths. And in a process of expressing those gifts and strengths, one beautifies the forest that one lives in and all the forests in the world. So that brings in a certain self-fulfillment. But here Sri Aurobindo calls for and enlightens us towards a third possibility beyond self-development and self-fulfillment, which is the divine fulfillment, or fulfillment of the divine purpose in this world, which happens when we truly emerge into this third space, moving out of the jungle, close to the Master of Works. And this Sri Aurobindo describes as, "For in reality no man works, but the nature works through him for the self-expression of a power within that proceeds from the infinite." So he reiterates this truth that no individual works. It is the nature which is working through him. It is the nature which is the creator of that individual. And it works for the self-expression of a power within. So that power is that deeper self that proceeds from the infinite. And that deeper self proceeds from the infinite supreme divine. To know that and live in the presence and in the being of the master of nature. So to know that deeper self and live in the past presence and in the being of the master of nature, free from desire and the illusion of personal impulsion, is the one thing needful. So living close to that, and as one moves out of the jungle, there is also a freedom from those desires and animals and illusion of personal impulsion that I am the doer of acts. And that is what is true revelation, and not the silence of inaction sitting on top of the rock. And as one acts out of this deeper self, one starts engaging in the action of divine fulfillment, not just self-development and self-fulfillment. The next question is that what is it that is the action of divine fulfillment? What is it that the divine intends in this world? And Sri Aurobindo has again talked about it at length, that the world here is not an illusion. It is a purposeful, meaningful movement of the divine, which is a progressive evolutionary space, moving from inert matter to cells, to plants, to animals, to human beings, to ever evolving human beings. And each of these forms have a progressively increasing capacity to be in touch with the divine and consciously bring forward the work of the divine. And it is not just that each of these forms are progressively superior to each other, which human beings tend to believe, because the divine is infinite and each of these forms also reflect different aspects of the divine. The unique infinite aspects of divine are reflected in unique different beings on this planet and in this universe. And divine fulfillment or alignment with the divine fulfillment lies in consciously contributing to the progress of this universe. And this is a question that every sadhak needs to ask oneself and make a clear choice at the outset of the sadhana. That what is it that is the ultimate goal that we seek in sadhana? Sure, many of us are still very far away from even learning to rise up the rock in the jungle. Learning to silence the mind and all the vital instincts in itself is a major challenge for all of us. But still, it is good for us to know and make a clear choice that what is the goal of our ultimate sadhana, because it is the goal that determines the direction in which sadhana goes. Because if moksha and nirvana is the ultimate purpose of sadhana, then one need not make so much effort and one can choose any of the one faculties. One can choose the heart and purify the heart and choose bhakti as one of the ways to experience that communion with the divine, or choose jnana as a way and purify the mind and silence the mind and experience that communion with the divine. But if we hold the purpose of divine fulfillment, the ultimate goal, as to fulfill the divine purpose in this world, which is evolution of this world, then all of these faculties are equally important, and the divine may call in for use any of these faculties, and they all need to be perfected. And this choice, what is it that is the ultimate goal that I seek out of the sadhana, has to be clear at the outset. And Sri Aurobindo here refers to some of the choices that some of the great yogis in the past have made. And he first quotes Bhagavad Puran, where it's written, I desire not the supreme state with all its 8 siddhis, nor the cessation of rebirth. So I don't desire that supreme state where there is cessation of birth and death, nor do I desire for all the 8 siddhis, the Ashta siddhis. May I assume the sorrow of all creatures who suffer and enter into them, so that they may be made free from grief. So Bhagavad Puran seeks not the moksha or the ultimate Ashtasiddhis, but it seeks to be a part of the sorrow and grief of every suffering soul on this earth and this universe. Because somewhere, even though divine is equally present in all, the divine priority always lies where there is suffering, where there is nothingness. because that is where the seed of its progressive evolution lies. Then Sri Aurobindo goes on to quote Swami Vivekananda, who says, I have lost all wish for my salvation. May I be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe in, the sum total of all souls, and above all, my God the wicked, my God the miserable, my God the poor of all races, of all species, is the special object of my worship. He who is the high and low, the saint and the sinner, the God and the worm, him worship, the visible, the knowable, the real, the omnipresent, break all other idols. Such powerful words from Swami Vivekananda, and he emphasizes the same thing, that the divine is present here amongst us, and he has lost all his wish or desire for his own salvation, but he seeks to work for that divine fulfillment within the wicked, within the miserable. Mother Teresa once said that it is in nothingness where the divine manifests itself the most. If you need to find the divine, find that nothingness in this world. And there are people with lack of resources, where there is nothingness of resources, where one can find the divine. And then there are the so-called rich, who are so rich in resources and success, but they are the poor rich because there is that nothingness of self-love which may exist in those poor rich. So even in the rich, where there's nothingness of self-love, or the poor, where there's nothingness of resources, or the criminal or the wicked, where there is again that nothingness of self-love, can the divine be seen. And by seeing the divine in all, one can consciously contribute to the progress and evolution of this universe. So having gained this clarity about what are the choices that some of the greatest yogis who have existed on this planet, who did not seek that salvation, who would rather take up the suffering of the sum total of all souls on this earth and break all other idols, having gained clarity on that, having gained clarity on our ultimate goal, the next thing is the how. So the purpose of Karma Yoga, is clear. The next question is how, which Sri Aurobindo has answered through many of these previous chapters in the book Synthesis of Yoga. But if it is to be summarized in a few words, Sri Aurobindo does that by saying that act in God. Act in the God rather than acting in the individual or acting in this world, which is what we are doing most of the time. We act in ourselves or we act outside in this world, which is the space of the forest. And when we say we act in God, for that, the action has to emerge out of a deep insight within us, whenever the action emerges out of a deep insight from us, then there is a possibility of initiation of action from inside the God. And then when the action is initiating from the divine or from inside the divine space, but we get again into the action space, again we get entangled into the outer world and into the jungle. And for this, Sri Aurobindo offers the remedy of consecrating the entire instrument of human being to that inner divine space. So when our senses, our vital, physical, mental, emotional, the entire being is consecrated to that inner divine space, then there is not just a possibility of initiating the action inside the divine space, but also truly perpetually acting in God. And this inner divine space is not something which is exclusively available to yogis. It is a progressive space. And at any level in sadhana, it is about constantly challenging to go deeper and deeper, to challenge one's mind to understand a little more, to challenge one's heart to love a bit more unconditionally, to challenge our vital to empathize a little more. So it is a progressive space where all of us can choose to go a little bit deeper and challenge ourselves every day. And as we progressively move into this deeper and deeper space, the lesser are we bound by the desires and personal impulsions, and lesser are we attached to the outcome. And the more we work progressively for self-development, self-fulfillment, and the divine fulfillment, and without realizing that wish for that personal salvation naturally falls away from us. All that remains is that inner sense of peace, and as we go deeper and deeper, that transforms into a divine delight in action. Another question that one may have is that as we start moving out of this forest and start acting for the divine intentions, how does our outer work change? How does our outer work transform? And the answer to this is that the outer work may still continue to be the same action, as that common dictum goes that what did a woodcutter do before enlightenment? He would cut wood and chop wood. And what would he do after enlightenment? He would still cut wood and chop wood. So the outer work for an individual who has moved into this deeper space may continue to be the same. But all that shifts is that it happens from that sincere space inside for the sake of the divine. Or there is also a possibility that there is an absolute diametrically opposite U-turn from what the person was doing until then. And that we can see in the life of Sri Aurobindo, who was in one phase of his life completely absorbed in the freedom struggle of our country, and he was developing himself and fulfilling his gifts of writing and inspiring others. And in process, he evoked the spirit of the country and moved and helped and contribute to the freedom struggle movement. But since he was so deeply and intimately in touch with that divine mother's voice inside. That voice made him move from this task to even a more bigger cause of fulfilling the divine intention of transformation of the meaning of what was perceived as yoga on earth, and to elevate the consciousness of the entire humanity, not just India as a country, not just contribute to the freedom struggle of India, but to the freedom struggle of the entire humanity, so to say. So the nature of work may remain the same as one works for the divine fulfillment, or it may completely transform, but it is all done for the sake of the divine. And even it's not just true for our outer works that we seek and we do them for the sake of the divine, but also when we seek the divine for the sake of the divine from that deeper space. When we seek the divine, we don't say or we don't aspire that I want to be one with the divine, I want to be liberated, I want to move out of the jungle, I want to see the Krishna everywhere. It emanates out of that deeper space where one seeks to see the divine for the sake of the divine in whatever way and form divine presents to us in the here and now. The divine may present to us in the form, its most beautiful form, or the divine may express itself as a beggar, and he may express himself as an enemy who is here to challenge our belief systems and thoughts. So the divine can present himself in whatever way and form, and for the sake of divine, one accepts whichever way and form the God presents himself in front of us. And Sri Aurobindo describes this in the words, the pursuit of liberation, of the soul's freedom, of the realization of our true and higher self, of union with the divine, is justified only because it is the highest law of our nature, because it is the attraction of that which is lower in us to that which is highest, is the divine will in us. So we seek the divine not again for I want to be with the divine, but because it is the natural divine will within us. It is a natural attraction of the lower self towards the higher self within all of us. That is its sufficient justification and its one true reason. All other motives are excrescences, minor or incidental truths, or useful lures which the soul must abandon the moment their utility has passed. So all the other lures, I want to seek the divine so that I can help contribute to the freedom struggle, which was one of the motives for Sri Aurobindo, had to be left when its utility was gone. And so for all other motives, I want to heal myself, I want to achieve this in life, I need the divine support for this. They all need to be eventually let go on, because ultimately it is a natural divine will within us to seek the divine beyond and seek the divine presence in and all around us. So just to summarize, we started by looking at in Karma Yoga the three basic impulsions which drive our action, which one needs to learn to rise above. The three impulsions being desire, meeting our necessities, and a restless instinct. These three things drive our day to day action. And for a certain degree of self mastery, one needs to learn to rise above them. And as one learns to rise above them, one needs to be clear about the ultimate purpose of rising above them. It is not to give up action, but to be aware that action emanates, is a part of nature, and the purpose of action is the divine fulfillment and expression of divine in this world. So in our process, the shift has to happen on the motive of action from these three impulses to more meaningful other three motives, which is self-development, self-fulfillment, and ultimately the divine fulfillment. And on the process of sadhana, a clarity needs to emerge on what is the purpose of sadhana. And ultimately, it is about understanding and putting into practice the basics of Karma Yoga, which can be summarized in the words act in God. And ultimately, even when we seek the divine, we are aware of the highest possible aspiration or purpose why we seek the divine, because it is a natural instinct. Sri Aurobindo, in one of the chapters in this book, writes a beautiful line, and I personally love to start every meditation with that line, which is, I seek the divine for the sake of divine present within and all around, in every creature, in every animate and inanimate thing. And in process, accepting any personal gain or desire and impulse which is motivating this sadhana or this meditation, just being aware of it, acknowledging it and accepting it. And with the purpose of thine transformation of this whole and thine establishment of truth here. So the purpose here also turns into the highest purpose, which is the divine purpose of transformation of this universe and establishment of truth. Thank you. Dr. Bijlani, would you like to add something?
Today's talk by Dr. Mankul Goyal was based on the chapter The Divine Work, and this chapter, strictly speaking, talks about the work which has taken a seeker to a point where he has understood all work at the deepest and highest level as something which is a part of the will of the divine. There's a master of works behind everything that happens, and all the work that he has done so far as a part of Karma Yoga has taken him to a point where now he lives in a constant awareness of the master of works, and therefore, according to certain schools of spiritual thought, he need not do any work at all, because now he has understood work at the highest and deepest level. And since the master of works is in any case at work and is running the universe, this individual feels entitled to not working at all. And whatever life he still has can be spent in just remaining in that constant awareness. And after he has left this world, he will not have to come back to this world again. And if that is the type of state of consciousness about which this chapter is, one can say that if someone has reached that level, then that person really need not even attend the satsang. The satsang is not meant for that person. But then coming to what implications it still has for people who may not have reached that level and are still using work, if not as the primary, at least as a major vehicle for spiritual growth. That is, they are on the path of karma yoga and are progressing. Now, what this implies, this chapter implies, is that while the person on the path of karma yoga is working towards as an individual, so it is self-development and self-fulfillment, the self with a small s. But then in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, we do not stop there. That is not the ultimate goal. And as Mankul said very nicely, that the direction depends upon the goal. And therefore, if this is not the goal, it means that something should continue. And if this was the goal, maybe work can now cease. There need not be any more work. But in Sri Aurobindo's and the Mother's yoga, integral yoga, this is not the goal. The goal goes beyond it. The goal is the fulfillment of the divine will in this world, not only in that individual, and in the world that in which we live. The divine will is to take the level of consciousness to higher levels so that eventually we'll have heaven established on earth. So it is the fulfillment of the will of the divine in this world which is the goal, and therefore there's a lot more for this individual still to do. Now, which means that the question is not whether such an individual who has reached that point, a sort of a point which may be considered by in certain schools of spiritual thought as the culminating point, the goal beyond which no work needs to be done. In Sri Aurobindo's and the Mother's yoga, that point is a significant milestone. But after that, the question is not whether to work or not. Only the question remains which work and how it is to be done. That's all the question. That these are the only two questions remain. When it comes to which work, it may continue to be the same type of work. But it doesn't mean that it has to be the same type of work. The nature of the work also could change. It could become more the type of work which that person was always uniquely made to do, or as a result of this sadhana has become more uniquely able to do. Because the essential idea of the work which helps the individual as well as the rest of the world, that is that collective goal, is doing something which expresses the love of this individual for the rest of the creation, and the expression of that love is to give, and what is it that the person gives? What the person can give is what he can give, and to whom? Those who need it. Now, this person, as a result of his self-development and reaching a point of self-fulfillment, has something maybe much more and very different from what he had when he started on this path, and therefore the nature of the work could change. It's not that it has to be the same. The next point is, how is this work to be done? This work is to be done in a way that it is completely free from all desire, completely free from all sense of I-ness and my-ness and so on, completely detached not only from the outcome of the work, but also from the work itself, detached from both action and inaction, which means it becomes more and more spontaneous, more and more driven by that higher force with which now this person is not only aligned, but has achieved a unification, so that the person is in a constant awareness of that force. So whatever comes spontaneously as a result of that alignment, as a result of that unification, is the work that he does without any further thought. Which means, in a way, it is spontaneous rather than planned work and so on. As and when things come along, he just continues with those. So that is the type of the work that this person does. So, this chapter, The Divine Work, is essentially about the work done by a sadhak at an advanced stage where there may be a certain feeling that I need not work at all, but that is only a limited way of thinking and certainly not in keeping with Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga.